Akshay, if you can hear me, please re-enter the meeting. It helps. Yeah, okay, let's get started off because I can't sit for very long. I've sat through the day listening to God knows what was being said. After some time, it all became wallpaper. Far too many people saying all kinds of things. Sitting and listening to them as a whole day is not a funny thing. Um, anyway, so let's start off for today. We are doing the social contractualists, and we have made a beginning with Thomas Hobbes. And the point that I was making about Thomas Hobbes is that one that pertains to um, the treatment of a text as a finished product versus the idea of text in context. Okay. Uh, the difference between the two is if you say that the text is a finished product completely, then whatever you need to know is there in the text itself. Okay, there is nothing outside of the text that is of relevance to the text that you have read. Uh, usually, usually, pulp fiction, and when I say pulp fiction, I mean fiction that is, you read and throw. Those kind of books, you can treat them as a text that is finished. Uh, because outside of what they are saying, there is nothing for us to learn or to know. But if you look at certain other texts, and this is where I had invoked the idea of, this is where I had invoked uh, Wilhelm Dilthey, and his methodological hermeneutics. I hope you remember this, because from now onwards, this will be a frequent occurrence. We would be talking about hermeneutics again and again. So Wilhelm Dilthey and his methodological hermeneutics point to um, what we call they point to what we call this text in context, or sometimes even ideas in context. The ideas in context is applicable to philology mainly, it is applicable to philology. And if you remember what I said about philology, philology uh, is not just the interpretation of a written work, but also of spoken word. That is the definition of philology. So if you are not having an access to somebody's written work, but if you have access to spoken word, and if your question is how can there be access to spoken word if it is not written somewhere, uh, you must understand that there are many traditions in the world. uh, if you talk about India, we have the Vedas, the Upanishads, all of them which were uh, spoken words, and transmission of knowledge of the Vedas was not just uh, through recitation, but it was also through the interpretations of the recitation that had been done of the various Vedas. In fact, if you look at some of the North Indian surnames, you will find that there are people who call themselves Dvivedi, Trivedi, Chaturvedi. Uh, Now, all these, um, Dvivedi is one who has mastered two Vedas. Trivedi is one who has mastered three Vedas. And Chaturvedi is one who has uh, mastered all the four Vedas. But it's become a surname now, which it was not originally. It was not originally a surname. It applied to a particular person who knew the Vedas, and you had to know it by heart. And it's not only something that you find in the Vedas, uh, even among Muslims, you have those who are called Hafiz. And Hafiz is a person who knows the Quran uh, completely uh, by memory. He can recite any part of it or the whole Quran if necessary. And uh, they also uh, have mastered the interpretation orally. It's not that they are not, uh, there is no writing. Initially, when the Quran was written, there was no writing. I mean, when the Quran was created, there was no writing. And the same thing goes uh, to the Vedas. However, the difference is that with the Quran, people could write either in Persian or Farsi or Arabi or Arabic. And in the case of the Vedas, Sanskrit as a language did not have a script till the 11th century CE, which is when the Devanagari script was adopted finally. The Devanagari script was finally adopted. And so you will see that there is a reason why Sanskrit was not didn't have a script. It was considered to be a divine language, and it was supposed to be for communication between celestial figures, uh, and therefore it didn't really have script, uh, that is the usual tale that is told. And even after the Devanagari script came into being, and even after the Devanagari script was used to write down Sanskrit, there were Brahmins in the southern part of the country who were unlettered. By unlettered, what we mean is they were illiterate. They couldn't read or write. Okay, but they knew the Vedas. They knew the Vedas. They knew them completely, but they were unlettered. Uh, so it is that is the importance of philology, because it's not just a written work that you're interpreting, but you're also uh, talking of spoken word. And spoken word is there in almost all religions. In fact, if you take the Talmud and the Torah, which are the uh, supposed texts of people of the Jewish faith or Judaism, there are people who know them by heart. In fact, today at a later stage, I shall be discussing one of those people, but this is not the juncture for it. When we come to that, I'll talk about him. So, what you should remember, therefore, is that Dilthey was not only talking about the retrieval of original meanings, he was talking about the retrieval of original meanings from the various texts. Excuse me. But he was also talking about doing justice to the author that you are reading or studying, and understand the author the way in which that author would like to be understood. That is another of Deltai's purposes. I told you I'm not a very big fan of Hans Gadamer. Gadamer, who talks about how you cannot uproot yourself from your context and go into another context. He talks about that. Uh, so, well, it isn't entirely without merit, that particular argument. It has its own merit, but it is not necessarily something that we have to accept in toto. We really don't have to accept that particular argument in toto, because it isn't necessarily it isn't necessary that necessarily true that you cannot go into another context. You can. You can go into someone else's context. For example, if you are talking about an untouchable and how the untouchable feels about the way in which people treat him, um, it is not something which is beyond the capacity of our imagination uh, to basically understand the sense of humiliation, somebody would uh, face when they are treated as untouchables. For example, if you want in my own life, I can give you, I can give an example from my own life. Uh, we'd gone to meet a pianist or a piano player for some reason. Let's not get into that. And we went there and we were talking to him. And then something came up about, you know, where one of my friends plays music. And he said, I play at various different pubs. Uh, One of my friends who was there in that day, and out of nowhere, this pianist's wife comes and says, we are people of God. We don't play music outside of church. So that shocked me a little. And I asked her, who's asking you to play music? We didn't come here to ask you to play music. We just came here to ask you because actually a song had been written. When you say a song has been written, it also means that the words have been written. The words are called lyrics, and the music is actually called the song, technically. Okay, so you also, the Western tradition, you also write down the progressions and at what time intervals they have to be played. So, one of the fascinating things about Western music is that somebody who has never ever heard a piece of music, if he is given what is called sheet music, he can play it exactly like it is supposed to be played, provided he knows how to read music. Anyway, so this man had actually, the pianist that I'm talking about, he had rewritten some of the things that uh, my friend and I wrote. And so we were asking him what was the progression he used there. Uh, and then this woman comes and says this, and I said, but we're not asking you to play anywhere with us. In fact, I got a little edgy. I got a little angry. And I said, if you're husband hadn't unnecessarily interfered in the composition of this little piece of music that we have written, if he hadn't rewritten it at the request of someone, doesn't matter, he should, if I was in his place, and since you're people of God, ethics would be most important to me, and I would have told the person that it is not right for me to write something when I am uh, when somebody else has actually written the original bit. Uh, so I said, "Who's asking you to play anywhere?" And the conversation kind of ended there. And when we were going, this lady uh, started dusting the chairs that we had sat on, especially the chair that my friend had sat on, because uh, for her, she was a pious lady, apparently. Came to know later on that she and her husband played in the Asrani Hotel for 5 years. So much for her being people of God and all that kind of nonsense. And she was dusting the chairs. We could see as we were going out. And the first thing that hit me then was how would an untouchable feel? How would an untouchable feel if he is treated like an untouchable? Okay, if he's treated like an untouchable, how would he feel? He would really feel terrible. Uh, till then, perhaps it is mainly something that you have as a nebulous idea. But when you start approximating your own experiences of humiliation, which are similar to the experiences of humiliation of other people, then it becomes absolutely clear to you as to what uh, the other person feels, how indignant, how insulted, how helpless would that person feel when he's treated as an untouchable. So, if you are going by that, what Dilthey says is not something which is completely out of the realm of the possible. It is possible to uproot yourself from your general context and empathize with others based on a similarity of experiences that we might have had, that two people might have had. They may not be the exact similar uh, this thing, but like for example, for the past few days, I've been suffering from this debilitating back pain. I'm even finding it very difficult to sit. And I have come to know that I cannot take any form of painkillers because of the simple fact that I am on neurological medication, um, and that neurological medication works on the brain, and opioids like tramadol, that's basically what I require because my pain, though it is, you feel it in the back, it is actually felt in your head. And ordinary non-steroidal uh, anti-inflammatory drugs don't really have the capability to kill the pain. But even if they do, uh, if I couldn't take tramadol because of the fact that I have been taking trazodone, uh, and if I cannot, and then I cannot take even NSAID, like what what should I say, like naproxen, because that reacts very badly with another medicine that I take, which is called mirtazapine. So it doesn't, they don't work well. So I've been told, bear with your pain, have some external applications. It is only through that, um, and you'll have to wait for this pain to come down. Now, if somebody tells me I have an acute pain, I can understand. I can even understand if somebody says, I have a terrible headache, because I am prone to migraines myself. And migraine headaches are the worst type of headaches. You get photophobia, you cannot even see light. If light is on, then the thing is unbearable. So if somebody says, I'm having uh, if somebody says I'm having a terrible headache, then I can understand, I can empathize how that person must be feeling. It is an approximation of, I can't feel his pain, but I can approximate the pain that I felt when somebody says, uh, I have a terrible headache, or if somebody says, I have a very bad backache. If somebody says these things, they are understandable. So it is not difficult for you to uproot yourself from your context. And like I told you, this experience that I had, uh, while I always found it uh, completely unacceptable that you treat a fellow human being uh, as an untouchable, and as uh, Gandhi wrote in his uh, autobiography, My Experiments with uh, Truth, in which he says he doesn't call the Aryans, he calls them Aryas, which is actually the technically correct usage. Uh, so he says the Aryas have taken uh, that set of people who do the most important work in society, who are responsible for the uh, generation of social wealth, those who are responsible for the upkeep of social life. These people are the most important, and the Aryas have rendered them into Anaryas and untouchables. And he says that there can't be a bigger crime than this, which is very true, which is absolutely true. It is a crime. The word that was used there is a crime. Since we're talking about this, Afrin, you must, you asked me, right, the other day, uh, the difference between Harijan and Dalit.
Yes,
Uh,
sir.
yeah. See, Dalit, I told you, is a person who's suppressed, depressed. But a literal translation, if you want, is a person who's broken physically and scattered. Okay, that is a literal translation. Um, since 2018, there is a government law that bans the usage of the word Dalit. It is very unfortunate that Ambedkarite groups have taken that as this thing of trying to, you know, um, break the influence of Ambedkar, which is not the case. Uh, it is a very unfortunate interpretation on the part of the Ambedkarites. If at all this Modi dispensation has done any good deed, one good deed is outlawing of the word Dalit, because I don't think you should refer to people as broken, scattered, depressed, suppressed. For how long will you do it? Because you're not, every time you're saying that, you're not saying anything new. You're not saying anything new. You are only repeating something. And that is insulting to the person whom you're calling a Dalit. So if I think this is the only one good deed of the Modi government that I can think of, uh, banning that particular word and giving the reasoning behind it, it's a good thing. And were you there when we were talking about the scheduled castes? Which schedule do they come in? Were you there, Afrin?
Yes, sir. But
Ye-
I forgotten.
No. Okay. Since friend Akshay couldn't join us, apparently he had some issues with his phone, I think. Uh, I'll uh, I'll talk about this when he's there, because he was the one who was talking about the schedules. So that I'll leave out for now. Anyway, so philology is also that putting an idea in context, putting a person in context, putting a text in context. So that is what is uh, done through philology. And hermeneutics, I told you, is Greek for interpretation, but uh, it needs hermeneutics is something that came in to the English language, not from Greek directly, but from the Bible, which was Latin, uh, and hermeneutics was mainly concerned with the study of the Bible, biblical studies to see which of the interpretations of the Bible were correct and which were not. It was used mainly for that. And later on, it went into the domain of uh, literary criticism. Hermeneutics were used there. Uh, and finally, it came into the domain of uh, into the domain of social sciences, uh, thanks to Herder, 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 but mainly uh, due to Wilhelm Dilthey. Uh, and as you can see, this whole tradition is a German tradition. Uh, 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 Herder was German, Dilthey was German, Gadamer is German. So the Germans started pronouncing this as hermeneutics because in um, in German, when you write EU together, it is pronounced oi. So even the news agency is not Reuters, Reuters. It's not Reuters, it is Reuters. So the Germans made it a point to call it hermeneutics, but we are not Germans, so we are under no obligation of any sort to call hermeneutics. Though there are some people who insist that they be called hermeneutics in the context of social sciences, which is rubbish in my view. Um, so, if we are talking about ideas in context, so the hermeneutics become applicable here. Now, you must understand that we were talking about the experimentalism of Machiavelli. I told you that the prince in English, or il princi, il principe in Latin uh, is an experimental work. and it uses the experimental method which is called the method of logical abstraction. Okay, and I told you in the case of Machiavelli, in order to establish establish a domain of politics, logically abstracts logically abstracts uh, what we call uh, society, and this he does to separate ethics from from politics, right? So Machiavelli used this particular method. Now, I told you the uh, kind of uh, early scholarship of Hobbes. I had talked to you about people like Leo Strauss. I had talked to you about people like um, George Sabine and Gettel, all of whom castigate him and treat him like he's some kind of an idiot uh, because of the fact that Hobbes says that in the state of nature, life is people sprout out of the ground like mushrooms. And he says that this state of nature is pre-social or pre-societal, if you want. And it is something that is a war ball against all, because nature has given rights to everyone, and in operationalizing these rights, people fight with each other. So it's the state of nature is a war ball against all, and he also says that life in the state of nature is solitary, short, not short, solitary, brutish, nasty, and short. But he says that human beings are also blessed with the capability of being rational, which animals are not. And I had told you that it was. Aristotle, who I suppose called the human being an animal, and very rightly, um, but all later works till Darwin comes into the scene, uh, we don't look at anybody talking about human beings as being animals. And if you look at Christianity, or any of the Abrahamic religions, they believe that only human beings have souls, and animals do not have souls. So it's a Darwinian theory of evolution that we have the treatment of man again as an animal, but otherwise, that whole credit should go to Aristotle, probably for being the first person to have called a human being an animal, uh, which is absolutely right. Anyway, so now if we apply the, if now we have to try and understand Hobbes's inconsistencies. How is it that somebody who is solitary, brutish, nasty, and whose life is very, very short, how does this person have rationality? And if he had this rationality, for how long has it been dormant? For how long has it been dormant, asleep? And when did it wake up? And why did it wake up all of a sudden? If you look at that, look at those questions, the ones that are raised by people like Leo Strauss, George Sabine, especially Sabine, who almost treats uh, Hobbes like he's some kind of a common fool. Um, so it's very obvious that Hobbes was misunderstood. So, what is then the correct understanding of Hobbes? For that, we have to say that the state of nature and the social contract in Hobbes are actually an experiment very similar to the Machiavellian experiment of logical abstraction. Machiavellian experiment of logical abstraction. If you remember, when I did Machiavelli, I told you that this goes back to the resolutive compositive method. Uh, so the method of logical abstraction is not an arbitrary method. It is a scientific method which has a certain purpose. It involves certain stages of experimentation, and therefore it is called the method. Okay, that's why we call it the method of uh, logical abstraction. I had also told you that abstraction can be for a minute or two, not more than that. It can be understood as subtraction or the removal of something from the picture that is there in front of you. So imagine if you're a Hindu, I've given you this example before. You you are confronted with a picture of the inner sanctorum of a temple, but there is no deity of any god there. There is no deity of God there. So while, say, somebody is painting the inner sanctum sanctorum of the Tirupati temple for a moment, let us say somebody is doing that, he gets every other detail right. He gets every other detail right, but does not paint the deity. The question that you'll ask yourself then is that it's not as if this man has not seen the temple. He has seen the temple. Otherwise, how can he get all the other details so accurately? Then why is the deity missing? Why is the deity missing? So that is the method of logical abstraction. Whatever, this is just an example. Let us say somebody wants to prove a point called X, or somebody wants to prove a point that a temple without a deity is no temple at all. It's the deity which makes the temple. Somebody wants to prove that particular point. So in order to prove that, they take the deity out in the painting. So when you do that, then obviously it becomes very obvious to you that it is a meaningless thing without a deity. What is the point on having a temple which doesn't have a deity? So let us say somebody did this, use this method of logical abstraction by taking out the deity, by taking out meaning by not painting the deity, by not painting the deity, but painting everything else. So that is the method of logical abstraction. That's how you have to understand it. Now, in Hobbes, the state of nature and the social contract are an experiment, and they use the method, and he uses the method of logical abstraction. There is a bit of a parenthesis here that I would like to insert. Do you know what is a parenthesis? Anybody? Well,
Don't know, sir.
okay. A parenthesis is if you're telling a main story, you're telling a story, but you suddenly realize that you need to clarify the usage of some words or whatever or ideas in that story that you're telling. So what you do is you stop the story and you insert the parenthesis. The thesis is your story. The parenthesis is a temporary halt to the thesis, but it provides information. It provides information that is absolutely necessary for the understanding of the main thesis. So that is how you have to understand a parenthesis. Okay, a parenthesis is a necessary insertion, sometimes abruptly, with the intention to clarify the main idea that is under discussion. So that is what a parenthesis is. All right. You've understood that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. If you've understood that, thank you. Anirudh, as usual, is being his stoic, quiet self, not saying anything.
Nothing like that, sir.
And I'm just fond of you, Anirudh. That is my problem. I get fond of my students, especially quiet ones like you. You're going to say something?
Nothing, sir. Nothing.
Okay. Okay. So that is a parenthesis. So now let me introduce a parenthesis here. What is the parenthesis that I'm using? My parenthesis is a clarification about the usage of the phrase social contract by Hobbes, because there are people like Erich Fromm who claim that the idea of a social contract is as old uh, as old as um, Moses, Moses the prophet. So, what is Erich Fromm's basic argument? Erich Fromm says social contract is nothing new. We needn't consider. Uh, we needn't consider Hobbes to be the progenitor of this particular idea in any form. Okay, he says that the idea of a social contract is absolutely an old one. Hobbes is only reusing an old contract. I mean, the old idea of a contract, and specifically a social contract, with the aim to prove a point, whatever that point may be. We'll be coming to it shortly. Right now we are in the parenthesis. So he says that the first instance of a social contract was between God and Moses, and between Moses and the chosen people from Egypt, the Jews, whom he was going to take to, whom he was ordered by God to take to the land of milk and honey, which is what we call Israel today. And in those days, it was called Judea and Samaria. Okay. Today, this falls under what is called the Palestinian region, and Israel has been set up there uh, by the attempts of setting up Israel there uh, was started by the British. And this is purely based on the Talmud and the Torah. And people say that uh, the Palestinians uh, who were at that particular time in the 20th century were Muslims. They were militarily the British, sorry, were trying to drive them out of certain territories which once formed uh, Judea and Samaria, and create an Israel there, a state for the Jews. The justification for that was the genocide carried out by uh, Adolf Hitler, uh, where he put Jews in gas chambers and just killed people of Jewish religion. And so it was believed that one should give a small, not a small, I'm sorry, one should give the Jews a nation of their own, which has been there from pre-biblical times. Uh, Now, let's be when I say pre-biblical, I mean the pre-Christian times, because the Hebrew Bible also exists, and it consists of the Talmud and the Torah, whereas the Christian Bible uh, consists of the Old and the New Testament. So we are talking about the pre-Christian biblical days. Anyway, so what is this story that Erich Fromm wants us to tell, wants us to know? The story that he wants to know is that people are being led from Egypt to right up to what was Judea and Samaria. And these were the chosen people, chosen by God. And Moses was chosen by God as well to lead them to Judea. And on the way, when these people are moving, they experience many difficulties. Uh, there was hunger, there was thirst, and every time hunger and thirst became unbearable. Every time they became unbearable, then it was mainly up to the people to go and ask Moses this question. Listen, you said you're taking us to a better life. You're taking us to a land of milk and honey. And here we are dying of thirst and hunger. What kind of a promise have you made to us? We want to go back. We want to go back to Egypt, We might have been slaves there, but at least we got water to drink, and uh, we got water to drink, and we also got uh, food to eat. Okay, so that is what these people asked of Moses, and Moses is supposed to have, every time people would ask him a question, then he would go into a hillock or a mound or sometimes a hill, and he would talk to God, and then uh, he would ask God, listen, you made me promise all these things to these people, and now they are saying that their life as slaves was much better than their life as it is. So, what do I tell them? So, every time God used to say, walk a few more, whatever distances were uh, mapped in, whatever the units they were, walk a few more and you'll find water there. And at one point, these chosen Jews even ask uh, Moses, listen, who's giving you all these, especially when he got the 10 commandments which he gave to the people. Uh, when he brought those 10 commandments, these people were perplexed and they asked him, who's talking to you? From whom are you getting all these orders? And when they asked him this question, Moses goes back up the hill, another hill, and talks to God and says, listen, I'm being asked that who's giving you all these commandments and everything? And I have no answer. Who do I say I'm getting these orders from? And the voice that he used to hear uh, basically said, tell them it's from God. And God, as such, basically means no name. God means no name, and by extension, it also means no shape. Okay. Though later on, the Jews tried to give a name to God called Yahweh. Okay. It didn't stick, that particular name. God remained God. Uh, anyway, so these instances are, according to Erich Fromm, those which indicate the existence of a social contract, that the Jews, the chosen people, did not blindly follow Moses. They kept asking him questions. They kept asking him about, you told us this, but where that is not happening. And it was obligatory for Moses to give them an answer. So he would go and talk to this voice, which later told him that it is called God, that it should be called God, rather. And so God had a obligation to Moses. God had an obligation to Moses to basically uh, answer his questions, and especially when people were dying, were not dying, were suffering from thirst and from uh, hunger, it also became the responsibility of God to basically ensure that these Jews got what they were they wanted. Well, the story of Moses continues. I'm not going to tell you that particular story, except that the Jews did finally enter Judea, and that is how it got its name, Judaism. Some people say it was called Judah. Judah. Uh, well, in the 12th and 13th centuries, we have this other Moses, whose name has been made into a Greek name, Maimonides. Uh, Otherwise, it is Moses ben Maimon. Uh, Ben Maimon is son of Maimon. Moses, son of Maimon. Okay, it is very similar to the Arabic bin. Okay, you say um Yaqub bin Muhammad, which is Yaqub, son of Muhammad. That is what it is, bin. Okay, so the Jews uh, had ben. The Muslims say salam, and the Jews say shalom. So there are a lot of these similarities, and I don't want to go into Maimonides' ideas. It's become pretty long as it is, and I'm finding it difficult to sit. I've been sitting all day. Uh, I made the stupid mistake of believing what the department told me. Uh, I sat most of the day waiting for something to do. Anyway, so there is Maimonides who also talks about a contract. So what Erich Fromm is trying to say is that there is nothing unique, there is nothing original about the social contract of Thomas Hobbes. Here we close the parenthesis. This was the parenthesis. That there's nothing unique, nothing original about Hobbes. Now let's close the parenthesis. I told you the whole story because the basis on which uh, Erich Fromm rejects this idea as unique is based in this particular story. So that's why I got into the parenthesis. Now, I'll just leave you with an idea. Erich Fromm was completely wrong in his interpretation not only is he wrong in his interpretation of the social contract in Hobbes, he is also absolutely wrong in his interpretation of Moses and the contract there, as well as I'm not going to talk about Maimonides. That is drawing the parenthesis too long, which we don't need to do. He's absolutely wrong in his interpretation of Moses and the contract that he says existed at that time, as well as about the contract that is supposed to have existed in the works of Maimonides. The correct word for this should be covenant, or maybe even just simply an arrangement, but it is certainly not a contract. So when I meet you tomorrow, I shall deal with this where it is not just it is not a contract, it is a covenant. That seems to be the most appropriate word, so I'll explain. It takes a little bit of explanation. Covenant, and even if we were to accept that there is something called a contract in pre-Hobbesian times, whether it is Moses or Maimonides or any one of these, one should understand that the Hobbesian social contract is a very, very unique kind of a social contract. So we'll stop here today. Now I'm in a bit of a fix. Half the class that attended this, I think, except for Afrin and Krupa Rani, are you still there, madam?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Who else is there from your class? I don't think there's anyone else. I think it's just Afrin and
Yes, sir. I and Kruparani.
yeah. So actually, I found out today that I could jolly well take a class in the morning, though it might have to be a little truncated. But since the majority seems to be those who come in the evening and don't come in the morning, uh, let me do this in the evening only. Let me finish Hobbes in the evening, because otherwise Anirudh, Durga Prasad, Vishnu Priya, all of you will be left with this thing that I did and suddenly poof, gone. So tomorrow also we have those terrible vivas for which I don't really have to be there. But since I have to be there, I have to be there. So we'll have it in the evening. Is that okay, Madam Afrin? Madam
Okay, sir.
Madam Kruparani?
Okay, sir.
Anirudh, do you... Oh, something here. Huh. So I was going to ask you, Vishnu Priya, you can talk. You don't have to text me like this. I like
Okay,
talking.
sir.
I,
Okay.
yeah. So I think to be fair to you, I'll have to deal with this in the evening tomorrow. And if I don't finish tomorrow, we'll shift the political ideologies class till I finish this to the morning, and this will continue to happen in the evening. Is that okay, Anirudh? Anirudh? Anirudh is gone AWOL. Hmm? Durga Prasad?
Yes, sir.
So is it a fair thing for me to continue this in the evening?
Yeah, sir. Okay, sir.
Okay. So I don't know where Anirudh has gone. Hmm? He's gone AWOL, away without leave.
No, sir.
No.
I was eating dinner.
Oh, sorry to have interrupted your dinner,
Ah, no,
Anirudh.
sir. Nothing.
No, I'm really sorry. Uh, so you would like me to continue this?
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So that's it then. I'll see you tomorrow evening. And day after tomorrow, let's see how this pans out. Depending on that, we'll work out day after tomorrow. Okay. Vishnu Priya, are you able to make more sense now than you were in the beginning? You,
Yes, sir.
you won't be able to make total sense, but are you able to make a little bit of a sense?
Yes, sir.
It's beginning to appear like sense to you. Okay, I just want to have a conversation with Vishnupriya. Vishnupriya, please don't go. Others, you can go now, and just let me talk to Vishnupriya for a couple of minutes. So,
Oh, okay, sir.
okay, so see you
Thank you, sir.
tomorrow evening. See you tomorrow evening.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.